You have to invest in technology. That's the bottom line. Next generation of workers, you can't run your shop on tribal knowledge anymore. With technology, the parts are more sophisticated now. The customer demands are more sophisticated. We've got software that will keep that tribal knowledge and store that tribal knowledge. So when the next gen person or new person comes to the shop, the software, you can now rely on it. You create new tribal knowledge is the best thing.
Welcome to the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts, Caleb Chamberlain from Oshkosh, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrakill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Want to level up your manufacturing or metal fabrication career? Fabricators and Manufacturers Association connects you with the education, training, and community you need to stay ahead. As an FMA member, you'll get access to exclusive resources, industry events, and a network of professionals who share your passion for making things better. Join today and start building your future in manufacturing at fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Hello, this is Tim Heston of the Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and Fabricator Magazine, and thanks so much for joining us for this special episode of the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. And this month, I'm joined by Jay Phillips, the chair at the FMA. How many years ago did you join the board, Jay?
About 9 years ago.
And, we've chatted a lot over the years, and you have, quite the history in metal fabrication and welding. First of all, just to get us grounded, to bring everybody back to how you got into the industry, who is Bill Stroud?
So Bill Stroud was my high school welding teacher. Took his class when I was a sophomore, and he was also our defensive back and wide receiver coach in football. But where I got my main influence is through welding. In his class, and he's old school.
So he's an old school. Was this high school shop, or was this?
Yeah, high school shop. Paso Robles High School. Was a sophomore in high school when I first went into his class, and he'd been teaching there for years. Pillar in the community.
How did he introduce you to welding?
My first experience with welding, I worked I was 9 years old, and I was helping washing diesel trucks for a company called Abadi Trucking. Gary Abadi Trucking is an Italian family who hauled hay and grain in Paso Robles area. And they were reflooring some grain trailers with sheet metal. And I was just a kid, and I climbed up. Actually, I was 11 at the time, but I climbed up on the corner of the trailer, and I was looking in. And I see this guy down there. He's got his hood down, and the arc's going, the smoke's just coming up, and he's stick welding it. I watched for a little while. He pops his hood up. He looks at me, and he says, "Hey, kid, you shouldn't watch that. It'll hurt your eyes." And I looked down, and I said, "No, my eyes are fine." And he pops the hood down and keeps welding. And I stay there, and then he changes the next stick. And I know what it is now. At the time, I didn't, but he stopped, put another stick in. He looked at me and said, "You want to try it?" I said, "Sure, I'll try it." So I dropped down in the trailer, and I slid down because they're at an angle, slid down to the bottom where the gate was, and walked across the floor. He handed me the hood, he handed me the stick, and the first thing I did when I went to strike that arc was stick that stick.
Of course, there you go.
Right.
That's the rite of passage.
That's exactly right. I was stuck, and I was trying to break it off, and then he held my hand and helped me get a little bead going, and then it was only about a minute or so, which was cool, and told him thanks, and I climbed back up to the corner, and I just kept watching. Well, that night when I went home, my eyes burned like crazy, and they were just water, and I was crying, and my mom stayed up half the night with me, just, "Are you going to be okay?" He's just really worried about me. And the next morning I woke up, and my mom said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, I think I want to be a welder." And she says, "Boy, what the hell is wrong with you? I stay up half the night worried about your butt, and you want to be some damn welder?" And she walked off, just still talking. And I didn't know at the time, but my dad knew I was going to be okay, but she didn't know I was going to be okay. But it was a good experience. So that was my first introduction to welding, and I always wanted to be a welder ever since then.
You probably hear your mom's voice over the years. What was the hook? What was the spark, so to speak, beyond the literal spark, obviously?
So with welding, there's come so many different skills, and I didn't know that at the time, but the spark, the smoke, and putting things together. It's hot, molten metal. You can't get more masculine than that, right? I'm sure you
Uh,
can, but
there you go. Okay, I get it.
it is just was just a draw, and I always wanted to be a welder ever since then. And then
Okay.
as you go throughout the career, you learn there's so many more facets to the industry than just welding alone.
Right, right. Now you're in Valley Iron in Fresno, steel service center out there, and with value added fab services, and which I think you helped set up over the years, right?
Yeah, that
Or
I
bring me
did.
through that.
That I did. So after high school, I went to junior college and worked at another company called Pass Robles Welding. Then when I finished junior college, I transferred to Fresno State, and I was looking for a part-time job, and that's Valley Iron Inc. here in Fresno. And when I came to Valley Iron, I worked just the will call because we're service center, but we do will call business. So if you want to build a 3-story building, you need all the structural steel plates, the stiffeners and connecting plates, whatever you need, even the miscellaneous stair treads, stair rail, all of that. We carry all the materials to build it. And we have, if you want to put up a tetherball pole in your backyard for the kids to play, we'll supply you as well. So I worked the will call for a while, and the company at the time, we were a bit smaller. There was about 35 employees. And I was looking around. I said, man, I could fix a lot of the things that we needed to fix. So I started welding. Just they had an old buzz box in the corner, and I'd put a couple of things together. And a couple of the guys that had been there for a while would go to the boss, say, hey, this guy's fixing stuff. He can help us do this. And then they started bringing me projects. So I'd fix this, I'd fix that, and then started building new racks. And it just grew from there. It just grew from there.
So kind of, describe how that grew, kind of how it spread from just that simple buzz box, so to speak.
That all began in 1993 when I first started working for Valley Iron. And as I put things together, the owners, the Briscoe family, kind of recognized my skill set, and they started asking me to do things and had some ideas of which way they wanted to take the company. So I kept building racks and making improvements. And then I don't know what year actually that they bought the property, but they had a property where they wanted to build a company from the ground up. And it was a 20-acre parcel. It was completely barren. Actually had 2 palm trees, a bunch of grass and weed, and probably 15 head of cattle on it. So they came in, tore the palm trees out, cleaned it all up, and started to build the new facility. And then they let me I didn't spearhead that project, but they let me facilitate and layout and design on the rackings and the flooring. And I worked with our purchasing agent who, Dave Beck is his name. Worked with him, just getting all the inventory set up. And when we were done with that, we opened doors in 2005. And then in 2006, the president, Noel Briscoe, came to me and says, we're thinking about doing a fabrication shop where we're going to start processing steel plate. And what's funny is he and I had the idea of starting this fab shop at the same time, as we were going to look at a piece of equipment, a Pettinghouse plate processor. And while we're on the plane, I was trying to wait for the right moment to say, hey, I'm thinking about, how about if we set up a little processing center? But he beat me to the punch on the plane. He says, hey, we're thinking about setting a little processing center up and we want you to run it. I said, okay. I was just about to ask you that.
All right.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, really cool. So we flew out to a customer of Pettinghouse's in Denver. We visited them, saw the equipment machine. We made the investment. So with that came a brand new building. It was from the ground up. We laid the slab, and they let me do the layout, design of the building. I worked with the architect and the engineers, designed the building, layout of the machine, flow of the work, everything. It was pretty cool. I got to bring in the power, which you really don't see this. I've learned, I mean, it's just what I did and got the experience, but little do you know that a lot of people don't get this opportunity, but I got to work with a power company to set a new pole and bring in all brand new power, 1600 amps of power. So
Wow.
yeah, it was amazing. When I look back,
Yeah.
it was just an amazing opportunity. And I have to thank the Briscoes for letting me have that opportunity and trusting me that I'd do a good job.
Now, we're both Gen X. How old were you at that point?
Oh, now I got to do some math. At that point, that was 2006. So 2006 minus 1971, I think it was 35.
Wow. See that's something. And that's, you're talking about, so you were 35, and so basically 20 years prior to that, you're seeing, the sparks for the first time,
Right.
and then all of a sudden, just 20 years later, you're building a whole new plant. And that says something about the metal fabrication career, because the opportunities you were given, I mean, not only obviously Valley Iron has something special to it too, obviously, and it's and you're still there, right? So what is that?
Right.
Was that? So you've never been at another fab shop?
Well,
I mean,
before,
obviously you've toured plenty, but yes.
yeah. Well, actually, got my experience, and I started in high school as a sophomore, and then I applied to pass for Robles Welding, and that's a story in itself. I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken, but all I wanted to do was be a welder. And my girlfriend at the time, it's a silly story, but they let me go from Kentucky Fried Chicken for something I didn't do. And when they found out later I didn't do it, they tried to hire me back. We were teenagers working at a fast food, and if you've been in fast food as a teenager, you have a lot of fun. It
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
anything stupid. It's just it wasn't me, and they thought it was me, and they found out later. But anyway, my girlfriend at the time said, when I was unemployed, she says, "You like welding? Why don't you apply to one of these welding shops around here?" And as women are more wiser than men, and it's true. I
Right.
listened to her and I put my applications in, and I was hired by Paso Robles Welding. A man named Keith Kirkland owned that, and the Kirkland family, and they hired me just as a teenager in the summer of 1988. And my senior year was 89. So when I went into my senior year in high school, I talked to Bill Stroud, my welding teacher, said, "Hey, I have a part-time job at the welding shop in town." And he knew who it was and the owner. And actually the owner, Keith Kirkland, was his student at one time,
Hmm.
believe it or not. That's how long Stroud had been there. So I uh, Bill Stroud, he signed me up for the ROP welding program, and that's how I was able to go to school in the morning, and then I'd go to the welding shop in the afternoon through the regional occupational program, our welding ROP, and I
Okay.
did that my entire senior year. And then when I graduated high school, I started going to college at Cuesta College, and I continued working for Paso Robles Welding for the next 5 years.
Okay. Okay. And then and after that, it was Valley Iron, right?
And
As
after
far as
that is Valley Iron. When I
yeah, yeah.
graduated Cuesta College in 5 years, junior college.
Well, what's interesting is, and over my years of reporting in the magazine, with the magazine, and in this industry, I've met several kinds of folks that at various fab shops. One I like to call the technical guru, who is just, he doesn't know how he gets it done, but he gets it done, and everybody looks up to him, and they're very valuable, and they're still an important part of this industry. Then there's the second kind of person I've run into, who's the technical mentor. And Stroud, I
Right.
think, would fit into this, where he could bring you through the processes, inspire you, open you up, open to the possibilities of what you can really do. Then you have also the business leader, where let's really shepherd a team and grow this entire organization. They may not be intimate with welding knowledge, or how the bend inductions on a brake, or tool selections on a drill press, what have you, but they know how to inspire, and they look at the big picture. You have a little bit of all three, considering your management of the fab shop. How many folks are in the fab shop now, and how have you grown that over the years?
Oh, now we have, I think I started with two guys, one programmer and one machinist, one machine operator. And then I was the backup operator. And then the programmer at the time, he would run the machine also. So there was three of us. And I want to say now there are 8 people there
8 people.
in the shop. And then there are 4 programmers, but that's just at the Fresno branch. We've grown since then. And we have another branch in Northern California, in Oroville, California. It's our second branch that does the processing. And they're primarily processing. They do more processing than they do service center, believe it or not. And there are three programmers, fourth if you count the branch manager, four. And then there's a whole myriad of operators and parts pullers. They've got quite an operation. We acquired them, so they were already running, and then we
Okay.
streamlined things, cleaned things up, and then it runs really well now. It's kind of a well-oiled machine.
See, now that's awesome. That brings up in another layer that's very common in this industry where shops get acquired and then you merge cultures and you have to inspire another kind of culture. So kind of bring me through how you learned how to onboard and train people, and what was your philosophy to ensure that that folks that shop culture thrived and that people were on the right seat on the bus, so to speak.
So that's a very good question and point. When it comes to onboarding and having the new people assimilate to the culture, to me, it begins with the interview. So in the interview, I look for language that fits the culture. For example, one thing I did for years, even before the shop, was I ran the bandsaw department. And I'd ask a guy, say, hey, in the interview, what kind of saw did you run? And some of them couldn't remember. They'd say, I don't know what kind it was. I just cut the parts. And I said, okay, do you remember what color it was? And some say, yeah, it was red. It was kind of beat up and old, but it was red. And I say, okay, if it's red, it's probably an Amada. Let's say, right? And then I'd say, you know what blades you use, what TPI, teeth per inch,
Mhm.
and he would say, no, I didn't do that. We had a maintenance guy that would change the blade when to go back, and some companies are that way.
Right,
So, and if they didn't know, I knew I was working with someone that was going to stay at the station and just do their job, right?
right. Mhm.
And sometimes we need that person, and then other times you're going to need somebody that's they're just what I'd say a team player. And then sometimes you need a team captain that needs to know the TPI and that needs to know all the speeds and feeds for the saw. They have to know everything. So it begins in the interview, and I just listen to their language. It has to fit. For example, a scalpel, we know where that's used, right? 9-inch grinder, we know where that's used. You have to know that language. If you can't speak the language, then you don't know the culture. For me, culture is defined by language. If you say merci, you know what culture that is. Gracias,
Right,
you know what culture that is, right? It's in the
right.
language. So I listen to the in the interview, and then when the person comes on board, that's when I would take the time to make sure that they understand our culture. I say, and I don't say forget where you came from, because where you came from is what I need from you. Let me figure out what traits and attributes that are going to help us succeed, and then how I can have you use what you already know to help you succeed. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what's interesting though, and you mentioned, language, but I've talked
Mhm.
to a lot of shops where, in fact, some shops, shop hiring managers purposely go after quote unquote greenhorns, where they're going, all right, I want fresh perspective because I don't want another shop's bad habits. But I listen to certain kinds of things as far as something. And so when you say language, are you saying, all right, he must, is it simply jargon and terminology, or is it the way they say things, the way they ask you questions?
That's actually all of it, because if they know the culture, then they know the language, right? So if I've had guys lean back in the chair in an interview and they're thinking they got this because they know everything. And that's what I would call the cowboy or hot shot. They think they're all that, and say they have all these skills and they know some of the buzzwords, but when I just dive deeper to ask them critical questions. And sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't. And I agree with the greenhorn or green hand. If someone's green, they still need to know the language, and I can teach them. And if they're honest, I'll ask decimals and fractions. Do you know your decimal fraction equivalents? Let's say Do you know how to convert from decimal fraction? Do you know how to convert from imperial to metric? And if it's no, I'm not familiar with that, then okay, well, that's something I can work with. But do you do understand that there's a metric system? Oh yeah, I totally understand the metric. And they'll say something like, I think 12 or 13 is like around half inch or so. That I can work with, right? Because they're giving me something and they've admitted that they really don't know it. And I've had people tell me, yeah, I know it. I know that. And I say, okay, what's the decimal equivalent of 5/8? And then silence.
Whoops.
Yeah. And they go, well, I think it's, if they just spit it out and they say, and then they say that's the same as, 18 millimeter or whatever. And I go, okay. Then they know, I know they know. Then I press them just a
Right.
little bit further just to see how the depth of their knowledge is.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
it's
that,
all of everything you said. It's the way they deliver it, the way they ask questions. I ask it all.
how do you judge and point out or measure and value curiosity?
That's a good one. That's a really good one because I've worked with actually our lead programmer now. The lead programmer, and he's actually programming supervisor, just got the position. Um, he was a very, very curious fellow. So curious, I had to grab him by the tail sometimes and just pull him back. Great guy. He was just full of energy. Let me do it, coach. Let me in, let me in, let me in. I'm like, okay. So it's a good thing. They're curious. They want to learn. That I can work with as well. I like that because I don't have to prompt them or keep them motivated. They're self-motivated, which is really good. But the problem is they get themselves in a position where guess what? They got to get themselves out. You get it
Right.
one way and they can't back out. And the short story is we had two 9-inch grinders and we needed to change the cords on them, the electrical cord. They were just frayed, and OSHA says you can't have frayed cords. So, or the insulation came off. So I said, hey, you want to fix these grinders for me? So yeah, I said, here's the two cords, and then here's a screwdriver. You pull the switch apart, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, I've done this. I can do it. I said, okay. So I go over, and he took it apart, and he says, man, I can't figure out how to get this thing back in there. And I looked at it. I said, oh, this doesn't look good. And I look at the other grinder, and it's torn apart as well. And he had the right thinking, but wrong methodology. Meaning, he tore apart the one, couldn't figure out how to get it back together, so he tore apart the other one, looking to see what to do. And he had pulled the wires, and the way the switches were made, you had to press down put a pin in this hole. It releases the lock lever, a little latch to pull the wire out, and then you put the new wire in. Well, he didn't do that. He just pulled them out, and it ruined the switches. And these were
Oh,
old metal case, aluminum case grinders. They were great. And then when I went to the company, said, I want to buy new switches, they said, we don't have those anymore. Those grinders are junk. But if you turn them in, we'll give you a deal on two new ones. So I lost two grinders because of curiosity.
that's right. That's right. I guess that's what sets this industry apart is and heck from my job if I if something goes wrong on my end I hit delete and rewrite the sentence.
Right. Yeah. On our
So
end,
I
it
charge
costs us
for it.
money.
With you guys, it's a little it's a little more complicated than that. But yeah, again, getting back to that, right seat on the bus, a lot of, and it's common in many industries, but in metal fab, it can be especially pronounced because of the different kinds of personalities where you have somebody promoted because of their technical expertise. They're amazing at what they do. But then, of course, you have that old adage of, they're promoted, promoted until, beyond their competence. In other words, that you get promoted, and then all of a sudden you have this new job as a manager, and you've never managed, and you're not on the right seat. This is not the right place for you. How have you identified that over the years, as far as getting the people in the right seat, where it's because it's very 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 tempting. Knowledge is one thing, and it's very tempting to promote people with a lot of knowledge. But it's also, just because they do their job very well doesn't mean they do another job very well. So kind of talk me through that of how you've worked at Valley Iron on that.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's part of shop culture also. And you have to watch the dynamic on it. Meaning, Just because the most knowledgeable guy in the shop, he can fix every machine, knows how to solve every problem, doesn't mean he knows how, or she, how to solve people problems, right? Managing people is a whole different ball game. You have to maintain motivation, you maintain the culture, maintain equipment, and you have to keep the machine. And when I say machine, that's the entire shop, everything running, making sure that the supplies are there, everything you have is there. So you have to have someone, when you promote, they need to know the overall big picture. They have to understand how the big picture works, as well as all the inner working parts, right? All the little intimate parts. So I look for someone that I don't have to tell them things twice, right? If I explain myself and I'll look at them and I'll watch their face and I said, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" They say, "Yeah." And I say, "Repeat back to me so I make sure I know what I told you, not that they understand that I told them exactly what I wanted them to know." So they'll repeat back to me. And after a while, I don't need them to repeat back to me. They can handle it. And then I would listen or look at the shop culture to see how they interact with everyone, right? And I know that if even in a family, if everybody's mad at dad, they're getting along together, right? They all get along. But
Right.
if they're mad at each other, and then the family dynamic kind of dies off. The same in the shop. If there's a feud in the shop, that's not good. But so I go out and I make sure that the beef is with me, and that way everybody else gets along and they're good. But
Right.
you have to have someone that has, I'd say, thick skin, that can handle that. That's not afraid to say, "Hey, this is what we need to do. This is what needs to be done," and give the orders, and then and stick to it. But be helpful at the same time.
Right, right, and fit with the job, the shop culture and the management philosophy, et cetera. Because I've talked to various companies where they promote and they realize, no, that's it's just not a good fit.
Right.
Now, and actually, to be quite frank, in this industry especially, it's a family industry.
It
And
really is.
it's a friend, people are family on the floor, even in either actual family or they're just really close. And they're friends or high school friends or college friends, most trade school friends. They get together and let's launch a shop. And they launch a
Right.
shop. They've been together for 20, 30 years. And we've written stories about this, some other FMA members where they said they had to fire their best friend because
And
they knew it didn't work. I don't know if you had to do any of that over your years, but it's something that when you're in that position, it's a reality that you got to do, and you have to have the emotional intelligence to carry that out in a civil way and in a way that helps everybody, right? So,
right.
yeah,
No, I've never had to fire any friends. I've kept away from that. I draw a line between the business and the friendship. And I've done that on purpose because I've seen it happen. And I just have always kept my distance on that. The friendships are worth more to me than the business. Because the
right.
business, one day I will retire. I'll step away or whatever the case may be. But friendship is for life. So
Right, right, right. So yeah, and it's just it just happens to be, it says, hey, my brother-in-law or my brother is the CFO, or whomever, et cetera.
right,
It's just a family business. Now, getting back also to, what, we always talk about, the FMA cycle where, it's attract, retain, engage, and then attract again the next generation. And I think you have really great insights on this, on how to really kind of emotionally connect to the next generation as they get into this industry. And one story I wanted to relay was a recent weld shop story that I did, Cogsville Construction down in Texas, 10-person shop. And the weld foreman used JavaScript on the weekends to code for fun for years. And then he, but then thanks to Claude and a view of the other AI engines, realized, wow, he could actually program some serious stuff with his basic knowledge. And so he built a material test report system, MTR system, that could automate a lot of the tedium away and really streamline operations. This guy's a weld foreman, and that has evolved into a production management system that's kind of an ERP replacement for the shop that actually was run on, hadn't invested in an ERP yet, but it's just interesting from a technological potential, but also from the cultural perspective, where I'm talking to a welder who loves software. What do you think about that as far as the next generation is concerned? Because, again, a lot of the folks that FMA is talking to, that's why we have camps. They don't have shop classes, but they
Right.
certainly get exposed to software. What do you think? What do you think we can do with that?
I think that story is pretty darn cool, and that's where curiosity is awesome. I mean, his curiosity on the weekends built something that's fully functioning now, and is actually sounds like it's bringing profit. It helped streamline the shop. It changed the culture, and it's bringing profit to that business. So the next gen, they are very curious. They're so curious, but the attention span is short. It seems like if they get bored with it, I'm done with this. I'm not interested in that anymore. It's like, okay, so that first one you said was in attract. So the attraction, I believe, is there. It's a really neat industry. Our industry, metal fabrication, because comes from the earth. You pull the ore, or whether it's recycled. When you see that ladle drop and all that molten metal come out, who's not excited to see that? You're either scared or excited, one or the other, right?
Right.
And then it gets processed through the mills, and and just every step of the process to the finished product is just cool. It's exciting, and it's just neat to make things. So I believe the attraction is there. The industry is attractive. And then it's just getting them in and developing the skills. That's the next set. So we attract, develop, and engage. So then we
Yeah.
develop the skills, and that's what's done either in the trade schools, at the camps, or that first job. And I kind of talked about that at the next gen panel at the annual meeting, about that first job being the one that shapes the mindset of the next generation going forward, what they're going to do, who they're going to be, how they're going to do it. It makes it's process, a stepping process. So once they get that first job, you never forget that first job. And I talked about the AC, the ass chewing. You get that first ass chewing.
Right.
The AC has been replaced with HR, right?
That's
They
right.
they can't give ACs anymore, but they kind of shape who you are. They push you in the right direction.
Right.
So,
That development is the toughest thing, is to get that engaged, because I see two levels. First of all, a little about my background. I don't know if you know, but my first job in publishing was at a magazine called the New Jersey Hook for
okay.
New Jersey tow truck drivers.
Mm.
Talk about salt of the earth.
Yeah,
Talking about ass chewing.
that's right.
Wow, man. It was for the Garden State Towmen's Association, and man, I remember as a 20-year-old graduate of a journalism school, I'm sitting there, and I had specialized in B2B, like technical. I really actually wanted to get B2B specialist media, so I'm an odd bird in that. In fact, that my career path has been rather linear, but man. You're talking about trial by fire, and it was basically just me, because it was such a small operation, and I was given a lot of autonomy, which I think helped. But the development aspect in this industry, over years of reporting, I've observed three challenges when it comes to development, or two, I would think, is that first, it's the patience. So learning, if you don't have an initial knack, the patience isn't there to stick with it. And especially
Right.
with something like welding, if you have stick welding, that's tough to, um, this is why I see that was the thing that excited me most about actually handheld laser welding, to be honest, when I saw it, because um, it actually engages newbies, and they actually do it better than, say, a TIG welder, because TIG welder wants to manipulate it, but the feed actually pushes you back and guides you, and you have a beautiful weld there. And it
Right.
doesn't work everywhere. Obviously, you can't do everything that a MIG weld can do, can't get into all the places that take, but at least it attracts that. But the challenge is getting that patience. And then on the other side of that I've seen, machines today have gotten so good that it can be tempting just to hire a warm body.
Right.
And that can be challenging as well. You absolutely need the latest machines because otherwise you can't be competitive. But on the other hand, I mean, I've heard from shop owners they worry about that, especially with press brakes, where they don't just want button pushers. They want somebody who really knows the fundamentals of bending on the floor. They're evolving to offline programming and all this because you just need to. That's the competitive landscape requires it. All right, now the competitive landscape requires it. How do we adapt this technology and yet still engage a, a workforce that's happy around it? So
Right.
I don't know if you have comments on that as far as engaging with the technology, because this really delves into the develop part of the FMA cycle. It's like, all right, how do you develop that so that you hook them? They've caught the metal fabrication bug, so to speak, and they're probably never going to leave.
Yeah, it was different when I was coming up because there was nothing programmed on the press brakes back in my day. And this
Right,
is
right,
in the late 80s. It was you programmed it on the metal, meaning you had a combination square and a tape measure and a sharpened piece of soapstone or a Sharpie black pen, and you did your layout marks and you set your depth on the brake and set the tonnage and your angles and your degrees, and you're checking that thing all the time. But I with today's generation, they grew up digitally. They don't know what it was like not to have a cell phone. So for
right.
them to see it, hooking them comes in the video to when you see it in simulation. So when it's programmed and it goes through the simulation, they're hooked on the video, right? And they've been seeing videos their entire life. But now you get to go out and see it in the real world, full 3D. The part that you just drew, or the part that your programmer drew, you're over the shoulder. I can do this with this bend, or I'm going to have to use this die. And they have the programming and the operator have to work hand in hand. So programmers will program things and they never see the parts they ever make in some companies. And they send it off, right? They hit send, it gets posted to the machine, it gets done on a pallet and out the door. And then sometimes the operators never see the building of the part. So to see it in the flat layout, the parts being imported, they need to know both processes. And this is what I'm saying, where you have to have the oh shoot, know the big picture. You have to know the big picture downstream. And what my best results in the shops was when my programmer would talk with the operator and they'd work together. I'll say,
If
hey,
that's the ideal.
right,
That's
and
the
this
ideal.
say, hey, this is what's going on. This is why I can tighten it up here. Programmer says I can tighten up here. I can move that back just a little bit, or we can shorten this edge. And then the operator says, well, if I change it to this die, that'll tighten that radius, and you won't have to do that. But
Right.
the software has a call out for something else. What the customer wants and what tools you have are two different things. But a smart operator and a smart or savvy operator and savvy programmer can work together to achieve what the customer wants. And that problem solving is what attracts them. And they're not bored, they're engaged, like this is good, they're happy, and they're high-fiving at the end when the parts are going on the pallet.
Right, right. That's why I kind of, so many of the pieces I've written over the years have to do with lean and engagement
Right.
and that kind of collaboration on the floor. I mean,
Yes.
I've seen, because and it's a logical kind of collaboration. It's not like, well, what are we doing here? No, actually, when I'm forming this piece, I need to make sure that this half lap joint is exactly what that welder needs. And in fact, that welder also, what's interesting is I've seen younger welders, especially, get fascinated, say, with some shops that just like invest in cobots simply because not only does it help with productivity, but it attracts that younger workforce that goes, "Hey, this is actually pretty cool. I get to design this process. This is, so it kind of expands beyond it. And how can I set up this robot so that it welds what was just been on the press brake?" And when I first started covering, say, offline programming with press brakes, there always used to be this complaint where, they do the offline bend programming and then they couldn't remove the part from the tools. Well, they forget that it gets formed up, or
Yep.
a very flimsy sheet, and it was off because the software did not take into account the gravity with the flange coming up, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But now the software's, I mean, it's getting so good that and it's also engineered to be conservative, which is actually a good thing. You want to be as conservative as you can offline, and then the operator can take it that next 20% and say, wait a minute, we can really do this, and let's tweak it this way.
Right.
And but then today's operator too, and we talk about this in the magazines, because when I first started covering this industry, a lot of times I would talk about, I would visit a shop. There was a punch press I remember that I covered, a punch press operation. It was mainly punching. This is back in the days when you had a lot of blank only shops. It was just had a lot of punching, turrets everywhere, and but they had tools everywhere. And the tools were just, it looked like, man. And I said, well, are you going to organize that? And he was like, well, Joe knows what he's doing. He's been with this company 40 years. And to be honest, off the record, I can say I'm not going to name the company, but we're just going to wait for him to retire. Then we'll change. Then we'll change it. And it happens, it happened because they're so worried because they had old machines and only he knew how to run them and all that kind of stuff. That's slowly going away, but I don't know. Is it still there? What's your perspective on that as far as, because it really ramped up in the night, especially, when globalization really hit and layoffs really hit and people became very protective. And so the communication shut down, like, all right, this is where my value is. I know how to operate this machine. I'm shutting up and getting parts out the door.
A little bit of that is still there. We've kind of broke that over the years because number one, the technology is there. You have to invest in technology. That's the bottom line. You really have to invest in it. And the next generation of workers, you can't run your shop on tribal knowledge anymore. And that's what we call it, tribal knowledge. Well, everybody knows this. How do they know? Because they were raised in the tribe, right? But the thing is, with technology, the parts are more sophisticated now. The customer demands are more sophisticated. Where things were done in 2 or 3 pieces, 3 bent or formed pieces, they're now all being done in 1 piece. Right? You're not doing the weldments anymore. Like, we're going to do this and spot weld it or stitch it, or no, it's done in 1 fabricated piece. And we have the technology and the tools to do that. So the need for, let's say, Joe to have that tribal knowledge, we don't need that. And you can't get Joe to conform to what's new. It's just not going to happen. And the thing is, his knowledge is invaluable. If you could take what he knows and take that skill set and apply it to the next gen, and they have this, and I'm not saying that on that old machine, I'm saying develop that skill set with the new machine, where they're not 100% relying on the software, but you create new tribal knowledge is the best thing, I guess, the best way to put it. Where, yes, the software says do this, but we get better results when we use this die. Okay, how do we incorporate that? Take that, we've tried it the way the software says, we didn't get what we wanted. Now we have to use this die instead. How do you go back and reprogram that software? And this is that collaboration effort that we were talking about earlier, where programmer, operator work together. We're no longer relying on tribal knowledge. We've got software that will keep that tribal knowledge and store that tribal knowledge. We don't have to rely on Joe anymore. So when the next gen person or new person comes to the shop, the software, you can now rely on it rather than that tribal knowledge.
Right. And, that kind of brings up another point where, and again, this is going to be covered in the magazine in the coming months, but I'm writing a scheduling piece. Job shop scheduling is always an issue. It's very, you have,
Yes.
it's a bear, but one shop I'm working with, and is an interview with a software platform, but as well, but it's a riff off the theory of constraints adjusted to the job shop, where they finally said, okay, Because whenever you say, well, what's the capacity, they used to ask, oh, what's my laser cutting capacity? What's my punching capacity? What's the capacity? And you say, all right, well, man, this is my beam on time. This is the punch, this is how often the punch, the metal, we're hitting metal and we're making money, right? And they realized, they backed up like, wait a minute now, blanking, cutting is not our constraint. And in fact, it never has been in our constraint in our product mix. Sometimes it's, first of all, they define their product mix where it's like, all right, I'm a job shop. So where do I want to grow that job shop? So they have a product mix that for a specific type of part, not specific part geometry, but a specific type of job, kind of like the 80-20, where you do a Pareto analysis and go, okay, this represents most of the value we provide, and this is what we're good at. This is how we can compete in the market. This is where we want to push ahead.
Our wheelhouse.
This is our main wheelhouse. Yeah, we can do a lot of blank only work, but that we don't get the margins like we do this other work. So this is where we want to schedule around. And so, all right, now, then we identify the constraints around those, and then we reduce our WIP, which means we got to let machines sit idle. And then in this story I'm working on, they had the hardest. The guys are like, "You mean I'm just going to let?" It's like, yeah, you have to move over to where the constraint is because that's how we manage throughput. We maximize throughput through the constraint process. But if you're just building up WIP to the constraint, there's no point. So stop running the machine. Right. And this is what else you can do to help us out. And they said, but that's not the way we've done it. We've always done it this way. That's the way we've always done it. That's the way we've always done it. How do you fight that?
That is a tough one because it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be what we've always done, right?
Exactly. There's this amazing inertia. Now, granted, the new way may not make sense at first because you look, it's like the machine's not running. So the new way may look, oh my gosh, but how do you develop people? This is part of development and also engagement in that circle, FMA circle, is how do you develop people while also not letting go of that initial curiosity and that sponge like, well, hey, maybe this will work. Because over years, people get hardened to like, this is the way we've always done it. This is what I know.
Right. So I have encountered that for years. And what I've learned is I have to back up and then walk them through the big picture. And I have to do that with the key people because like I said, you've got the robot kid who doesn't care. He's going to do as he's told. And it's usually the veterans that say, I've been doing this forever. This is the way we do it. When I back them out and I start at the beginning, and it's worth the time doing it because if you get the buy-in of the veteran or the seasoned people in the shop or senior people in the shop, you get their buy-in, then everybody else follows suit. If you can't get their buy-in, it doesn't matter because during break, they're talking about, this is ridiculous. Can't believe they're making us do this, right? They're just going to let that machine sit in there. You know how much money we make off that machine when I'm running that? He doesn't even know how much money he makes off that machine. And sometimes if you can make all those parts and if you can't get them out the door, you're not making any money, but you've got to bring him back so he understands and say, okay, oops, this is where it starts. It goes to this station. We're putting too much out at this station over here. It can't keep up. So that way, therefore, we couldn't bill this month. We missed our mark. And then he says, oh, I see what you're talking about now. If we just, and now you get his input and his buy-in. If we just move that over there closer and I could pull Joe off of the other machine over there because all he's doing is maintenance and wiping it down. I know he's caught up. I'll have him go over there and help. Right. And that alleviate, and now he's got the buy-in. You say, okay, if you think you can make it work, and that's the beauty of when I worked for the Briscoes, the dad, Jim Briscoe, he would come out and tell me, I have this idea, this is what I want done. I'd say, okay. I said, well, I think if we did this, that might help get you what you want. And he says, you know what? I'm the boss. We do what I say. But if I like your idea better, we go with your idea. And he'd look at me and go, I like your idea. Make it happen. And he'd just walk away. And he'd give me that autonomy to go out and make it happen. So you have to do that. You've got to bring these guys back to square one, show them what the big picture. Once they understand, then they're all for it to help jump in and make it happen. Then you're
That's
more
that.
successful that way.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's really what it's all about is when it starts at the top, and if you have that manager that can let go and say, I like your idea. First, he liked your idea,
Right.
so he didn't have that resistance. He says, oh, wait a minute, I'm absorbing this. This is a new way of doing things. I can move forward. Let's try this. But then also, I talked to a shop years ago where they actually cross train, but not only cross train, but they would even even welders, even folks making a lot of money an hour. He said, all right, today you're going to work in the shipping department. Why are you
Oh,
going to work on
wow.
the shipping department? Because that's where we make money. That's where parts get on the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's loaded on the truck, well, and it's not because he started doing this because he found out that the people in the shipping department, they would load parts on the truck and then not load them correctly. And then the parts would get damaged in transit. And that's the worst place to have rework is at the very end.
That's right.
Or perhaps in the shrink wrap process, and they'd screw up and something would fall over. It wasn't stacked together properly. And so you'd have rework at the very end of the value stream, which is the absolute worst. That means every process was wasted right beforehand.
Right.
And so that helped kind of alleviate that this machine is making money. I'm making money with this machine. And it's almost which I can understand because that's what you know as a punch press
Right.
operator, as a laser operator. If I can do this many parts an hour, I'm kicking butt, and that's my value to the company, and I'm making the company money because otherwise, this place would fall apart without me. No, I can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, you know how it is. But have that kind of humility of like, hey, this actually, when I'm running this laser, we're spending money. We're spending power, we're spending time, we're spending material, and that material's sitting on the floor. That's just cash sitting there, not doing anybody any good. It can't get into my pocket until it's out the door.
Right.
So but then that extends also to collections was a whole nother thing I did a story on where this shop leaned out, but then they never could get paid by their customers. I was like, wait a minute now. So everybody has to be on the same page in this industry, which that's what makes it so engaging. This is a small company industry, and even if it's a larger company, it's a large company that almost acts small. So you even have the largest fab shops out there or fabrication suppliers out there, or even the fabrication departments of large OEMs. That department acts like a family. Like, all right, we're going to get this out. Of course, I'm an industry reporter. I'm the opposite walking antonym of a non-disclosure agreement, right? So
That's funny. Yes, you are.
I've heard stories. And I always kind of report it secondhand in the magazine because it's a reality of the industry. There are unsafe shops out there. There are my way or the highway shops, and I've actually been to a lot of shops. I go there, blue haze is hanging. It's dirt. I mean, yes, this is not your parents' metal fabrication. It's not your parents'. This is not your father's fabrication, so to speak. But in some cases, well, one, the nature of the job, sometimes heavy plate fab, you can't, it's not going to be it's not going to be medical precision sheet stainless food grade. It's a different industry, different environment.
Right.
But in some cases I've seen it's like, that's, there's a reason why we have a safety council.
That's exactly right.
And a safety award for that matter. So how do you instill that safety? You're engaged with that welding, and it's this is kind of a cowboy industry. When people get engaged, they want to move forward, but how do you make sure that people stay safe and they're wearing their gloves, so to speak?
So that takes me back to when I worked for the Kirklands at Paso Robles Welding. When it came to safety, his thing was safety glasses and safety in general. Wear your gloves, all of that. That's where you can be my way or the highway. You want to keep this job, you will wear those gloves. You want to keep this job, you will wear that hard hat. You want to keep this job, that's where all bets are off. All bets are off. You can do that. It's my way or the highway. This is the way I want it done. And you're asking them to do something unsafe or that's not right. That's a different story. But when it comes to safety, you can do that. And I've heard all the pitches, you want to go home to your loved ones in one piece and all that. But one I used with a couple of the guys, and they wouldn't wear the safety glass, or I'd catch them and they don't have them on. I said, you need to wear your safety glass. Your eyes are so important. One day you're going to get so old where you're just going to be laying in the nursing home, and there's going to be the young nurses that are coming in and helping you out, and you want to be able to see them and check them
Right.
out. You want your eyes good for the rest of your life.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, that was a great story. I mean, there was a FabTech presentation years ago where, um, and it doesn't matter how many safety awards you've gotten. This one particular company had all sorts of safety awards from us and from other organizations because they just had great, days days without incident. But then one day, the guy was wearing safety glasses, but a metal shard, this is from a stamping press, um, was floating through the air that was a little larger, and it got into his eye
Oh, wow.
behind the safety glasses. And so they actually invested in better kinds of safety glasses for this. But it was kind of a remembrance saying, listen, you always have to be vigilant. This is it's just a matter. It's a matter of what the industry is.
Right.
And it's just a reality, and a very small chance. It's like driving without a seatbelt. You can drive without a seatbelt for years,
Mm-hmm.
but
And
then
one day,
watch out, and it's
one
just
day
the
it will
wrong
come.
thing.
Safety first. If you don't like it, there's the gate. We're going to save you.
Right, right. So that's kind of the final element of the development triangle. Well, not final, but one of the things that starts right from the attract stage, like from
Right.
zero
Part
to
of the culture.
develop. Yeah. Regarding engagement, kind of bring me through one thing I've found when I've visited shops, etc. And in fact, a lot of shop owners ask me because I'm lucky enough to have visited several hundred shops over the past two decades, really. That it's this is a fragmented industry. You have there's not a whole lot of um, a lot of folks never see folks in other areas of the country, in other areas. How do you what are ways to get people involved and get outside their four walls, not only with FMA but with all industry events, and industry associations and other associations? I've talked to fab shops, and because fab shops who tend to get involved with the Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, they're also involved in local business roundtables. They have CEO meets of different. They get inspiration from different industries. They're that kind of people. But then we have a large swath in this industry that it's a fragmented industry, and they never really get involved, so to speak. So how do you spur that involvement?
That's that's a very good question also. What I've learned through FMA is there's a lot more to the world than just my four walls. You always in metal fabrication business, and probably in any business, you focus on what's in your four walls and what's in your wheelhouse. You just focus on that day in and day out. It's such a fast-paced business. It is such a nonstop business. It's in Dan Davis wrote that article that fabricators and manufacturers, we never say no. We are constantly trying to help our customer, looking for solutions. We never say no. We do all we can. And the key is we're all alike and similar in that fashion throughout the industry, no matter how large the company or how small the company is, we're all the same mindset. So when you go outside of your four walls and visit someone else's four walls, you're experiencing the same issues and problems. But this guy, you might have 10 of the same problems, but the shop you visit or the people you encounter or engage with, they've got two of the problems figured out. And you might have one of the problems figured out. Well, when you collaborate and share those ideas, now he has three figured out and you have three figured out, right? It moves you forward, and it makes you want to do more and go talk to more people, visit shops and talk. We don't come together. And a lot of it is because of competition. It's such, more than anybody, that it is a very competitive industry, so competitive. But the issue is when we collaborate and work together, you can set that aside. And that's what's really neat about the FMA. All that gets set aside. The competitive edge, it goes away, and we come together for the industry That's what's really neat about it. We do it for the industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to keep them engaged, I recommend they have to go outside of their four walls. And that's one of the things that I regret that I didn't do more or join the FMA sooner, because I've been in the business nearly 40 years now, and only the last 9 to 10 have been in the FMA, and that's the most professional development that I've ever done these last 9 to 10 years. And I wish I've done more. And I encourage, if you're young, just getting in the industry, go out and learn as much as you can. Meet people, engage with people, visit shops. If you don't know what career you want and you have an interview, sign up for as many or apply for as many interviews as you can get. And when you're in that interview, ask questions. Ask the people. One question I always give to people, and young people come to me and they'll say, "Hey, I have an interview coming up and I don't know what to do." I said, "Here's what I'm going to ask you to do." At the end of the interview, they will ask you, "Do you have any questions for me?" They're going to ask you that. It always comes. And the question you're going to ask is this. You're going to ask them, how did they get involved in this business? How did you make it to where you are right there? Because everyone wants to tell their story. They all want
Right.
to tell their story. And
And,
if it's a
and
panel of people, you ask each one of them and they're going to tell their story. That's part of the interview. And they say, "Why do you ask that?" And it's 'cause I'm young and I want to know which direction I want to head. You guys all seem like you're doing well. You're happy with what you do. I want that same for me. And
right.
that's a different kind of question. It's kind of a cheater question because like, I
Right.
like this
Well,
guy.
the one thing that has always attracted me to FMA events and other manufacturing events is it's grounded in reality.
Yes.
You can't bullshit sheet metal.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, it's like, you know what? It either meets spec or it doesn't. It either flows through the shop and the money and you succeed in the market or you fail in the market. So
Right.
it's there's no and quality is measured in thousandths of an inch or millimeter, and that is that's the gauge. You actually gauge a business success by an actual gauge, so to
Yeah.
speak.
It's do or
So,
die. That's
right.
right.
And that I think is again goes back to the attract when we keep going around that circle is that I don't know if you've ever heard of David Graeber. He's a cultural anthropologist, and he wrote
This
this
in
wonderful
Britain.
book. Well, he lived in Britain. He's American, but he
Okay.
lived. He's passed on at this point. But he had a great book out that I saw at Barnes and Noble, and I had to pick it up. It's called Bullshit Jobs. Excuse my language, but that was what the book said. That was the title of the book. And he did a study on how many working professionals today find their jobs utterly meaningless. That they go to work, they punch in, they, click a few buttons, make some PowerPoints, build a report that they have no idea, probably will never get read. They just work for somebody who built up a fiefdom of a department because of some political mess at some corporation, etc. And they
Right.
said, whether it be in academia or in the corporate world, there's just so many people who are just not engaged and not happy because they have no idea what the point of it is. What is this company doing? And you see this in a lot of corporate consulting. You see this in software where they develop a product, but like, well, how do you actually make money with this product? What's the business model behind this product? And we don't understand. It's one reason why I tend to get calls from investors these days. Investors are very interested in metal fabrication and
Oh
manufacturing
yeah.
in general because there are so many, not only because AI is basically utterly changing a lot of industries, but they're realizing that AI is really going to supercharge manufacturing, and that these industries have a point where in the AI space, you've got some pets.com ideas out there where they're just launching this AI business, but there's nothing behind it. What's the point? What are you doing? And you can tell that there's a lot of money flowing into these, and then the culture just kind of collapses because you're just, that there's no point to it all. Where in manufacturing, you never have that question. You know what the
No.
point is. You
Right.
know that we are fabricating, fabricating excellence. That's what it is. And it could be, collaborating with customers on design engineering. It could be collaborating with the shop floor, but you have a mission and you're going to perform that mission. And that I think is the best thing about reporting on this industry is that when I ask questions, the answers are always poignant and you really can't talk your way out of poor performance
No,
because
you can't.
it's right there in front of you. And I think, that fact alone kind of grounds people at these events, which is why I think, it's so valuable when I see at FabTech, I guess, our largest engagement event, of course, 40,000 people get together. And when I see students there, I'm always, that's the best part for me. It's like you're walking around, you're seeing what it's about, listen to what these people are saying, and this is what it is. We're all here together. Let's go to conferences. Let's go to roundtables at this event. Let's see what people are talking about, because that's what because this can really add meaning to a fulfilling career. So
It really can. And it's the lifestyle. I always relate it to farming, because the farmers have to produce a product. At the end, they produce a product. Fabricators, manufacturers, we have to produce a product, and it has to be good quality, just like a farmer. Otherwise, it won't sell. It can't go to market. And like you said, you can't bullshit it. You can't bullshit the product. You can't bullshit
That's
the
right.
food, and you can't bullshit the product.
That's right.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they go hand in hand.
like Dick Callage, who's a FMA member who's passed on years ago, but he was a kind of almost a mentor to me when I worked with him, and he brought me around to various fab shops as far as how he did some lean transformations, and we always used to call him the shop floor whisperer.
Oh,
He'd
wow.
go to the shop floor, and he said, "Truth resides on the shop floor."
It does. It truly
So,
does.
and he worked at a large OEM manufacturer, and not to say that there's no BS in larger corporations, of course, and in the office you can massage numbers, you can massage metrics. So I'm not saying, but those can only hide the truth for so long. The truth resides on the shop floor, and so that's where it is. So Jay, we've been chatting forever. I can blather on all day.
Same here.
Any final thoughts, Jay, as far as your mission as FMA chair for this year? What's your mission? What do you hope to accomplish?
FMA it runs very smooth. Ed Udell and the staff, they all do a wonderful job making that thing go. So they ask for input and ideas from industry members. They need, I'll say we need input from the industry. There's some things helping accomplish the mission. One we've already done was the branding. I helped rebrand. We rebranded FMA. We rebranded SparkForce now, and just launching that and driving the mission forward and engaging more the next generation, more students, the young people, into becoming members, and just making our industry sexy. That's really what I want to do. Just build it better and bigger, or bigger and better. My mission is to attract, develop, and engage the next generation of people for the FMA in our industry.
And it all starts with that first engagement and jamming that stick electrode into the well puddle and going, "Oops."
Yep.
Again.
That's exactly right. But yeah, there's a lot we want to do. It's just, I've loved my time with the FMA. It's been great, absolutely great, and I plan on doing more and just taking it to the next level.
All right. Well, Jay, thank you so much. And thanks to you all for sticking with us for this edition for Next Gen Metal Fab Podcast. And we'll all see you next time.
The Next Gen Metal Fab Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.